There are 8 teams that can cut down the nets. Your Arizona Wildcats are one of them.
You are Locked On Wildcats, your daily podcast on the Arizona Wildcats. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome into Locked On Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Now the number one sports podcast network around. I'm your host, Leif Thulin, your resident college basketball guru, stats nerd, point guard by game, and ball knower by trade. And I'm excited to talk Arizona hoops with you today. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Today on the show, I'm going to delineate the contenders from the pretenders. And I'm going to do so in the wee days of December and tell you who's good enough to win it all in April and why. And I've taken just about 357 teams out of the equation. There's only a few that I think are worthy, and I'll tell you all about them next. So let's dive right in. Let's start with your Arizona Wildcats. They're ranked second in the AP poll, and that's for the second consecutive week, and they deserve to be ranked there, and you can make the argument resume-wise they're number one. Interestingly, despite those big wins against marquee programs, they're lower on KenPom and in the net rankings, which were revealed yesterday, than some others, including teams that I don't think can contend for a Final Four or a national championship. So that is peculiar, and we'll see how long that holds out, because usually by the end of the season, especially by March Madness, and once these teams are cutting down the nets, usually the best 5 teams are within the top 7. Like, there's not much room for error with KenPom. They do a very good job of picking who is there as a true championship contender. Arizona right now is 8th in KenPom and 6th in the net, despite the best resume in basketball, bar none. But they are, in my opinion, tier 1 title contenders for both their play early this season, but also how much growth can be had and should be had without assuming anything crazy. There's young guys that will get better, and they have 4 of their 8 main rotational pieces as true freshmen and already have marquee wins where they haven't had performances that are too outside of the norm. And that is very rare at this point for a team to be that mature when seemingly the team should be immature. So let's name the 8 teams that I think can win it all, then break them into tiers. Purdue, Arizona, and Michigan are the top 3 of the AP poll, and they all have a chance to win it all. To me, that's tier 1. Then you look at Duke and UConn, and I think they're right there. Like, I think those are the top 5 teams in the sport. I would put Duke and UConn in tier 2 or tier 1B as opposed to tier 1A of Purdue, Arizona, and Michigan. And then there's Gonzaga, Houston, and Louisville. And those are the 8 teams I think their title odds are good bets. I would say, like, those are the teams. If it's someone else, I'd be pretty surprised. And I think their title odds should be in the order I read them. So once again, that's Purdue, Arizona, Michigan, Duke, UConn, Gonzaga, Houston, Louisville. And honestly, those last 3, I could make reasons for them not to be there, and I could even trim it to 5. It's probably too narrow to do in December. But let's discuss the metrics of why I believe the title winner will come from this group. I've separated just 7 games in. Fun fact, 19 of the last 20 championship winners were undefeated by Thanksgiving. We just had Thanksgiving. Arizona, Michigan, Purdue, Duke, and Louisville fit those parameters. And the second part of the fun fact is those teams, those 19 of those 20, were top 20 in offense, top 30 in defense. And most of those top 20 in offense were top 10 in offense. So all the teams listed fit that, except for Houston on offense is 32nd, and Louisville on defense is 30th. So you could really be pretty nitpicky with those parameters. So all 8 are top 10 in KenPom. So these predictions aren't too crazy. Like I said, they usually are pretty good at predicting who are good teams. So here is my tier A. Arizona, Purdue, and Michigan. Yes, they look the best by my eyes right now. Yes, they are ranked the highest, but I think that's a good thing that the voters have gotten that right at least. Michigan dominated the Players era, mauling Gonzaga in the title game, skyrocketing them up in the rankings, both in KenPom and in the AP rankings. And right now, because of that win over what was number 1 Gonzaga and KenPom, Michigan is now the number 1 KenPom team. If they were to hold this out, would be the number 1 team ever. Purdue sits second all-time right now behind the present Michigan team, so that's pretty crazy that the top two are top two ever in KenPom. And the teams that have finished top 10 ever in KenPom, meaning a full season's worth of data in that metric, have all won the title or made Final Fours, like Duke of last year, whom I've compared very favorably to this year's Arizona team, meaning Arizona is really good because that Duke team is an all-timer. The other one of the other teams that didn't make it that far was the Kentucky team that went 38-1 and had Devin Booker. Yes, Devin Booker come off the bench and was led by Karl Anthony Towns. So some pretty excellent teams. That's elite company. The reason for Michigan being a title team is that they're huge. Defensively, they're a top 3 defense in the sport and will win rebounding battles against just about anyone. And thus, they get more shots on both offensive glass by rebounding and also by forcing turnovers. And then they have an All-American caliber wing, and that's the Axel Landeberg. The concern for Michigan that I have is that their shooting is iffy and their point guard play is iffy. So if I'm wary of them, even despite those crazy astronomical numbers, sue me. But I would still put them in Tier A. I think if I were to compare them to Arizona and Purdue, who have all-conference and Jaden Bradley and maybe all-American caliber guard like Jaden Bradley, and then an all-American player of the year frontrunner in Braden Smith, that is where I prefer the balance of Arizona and the balance of Purdue over the explosivity of Michigan, who can explode for those type of performances, but they also have barely eked out wins against TCU and Wake Forest. Like there have been bad games that have happened, and the eye test would say, oh, Michigan wasn't very good in those games. And I watched more of those games than I did of them blowing out Gonzaga. So I'm wary because I saw more of them struggle versus when they dominated everyone in Players Era. As for Purdue, the recipe's simple. They retained 2 All-Americans from last year. That's Braden Smith and Trey Kaufman-Renn. And they include the front runner for National Player of the Year, Braden Smith. They're old. They have a fantastic coach in Matt Painter. They're amazing on offense and shored up their main weakness, which was rebounding. And now they play 2 centers to grab boards and protect the rim. Those were their 2 big deficiencies last year from a team that was on the Sweet 16. And the year before that, they were in the national championship game. They don't disrupt as much defensively as some of the other teams, but they're stout, they're steady, and have beaten Alabama and Texas Tech, both offensively explosive teams. And they both have those 2 teams that they beat do have warts. And I think that is necessary to mention because they beat them and they beat them soundly. They beat Alabama and were in control of that game in Tuscaloosa. And that was one of the biggest wins of the season. And then they blasted Texas Tech. But Texas Tech does not impress me right now. Purdue is first on offense and 20th on defense. They're really good. Don't get me wrong. They're the team I have number 1 in my AP poll or my Leif Thulin poll. But typically by the end of the year, 4 or 5 teams are top 20 in both. And I think Purdue will, both offense and defense, and I think Purdue will teeter on this range because I don't know how good and how disruptive their defense is. And that brings me to Arizona. Your beloved Arizona Wildcats, they have the best resume in the country. I've told you this numerous times. They've beaten good teams. They're the youngest team we've named thus far and have the most room to grow, both in terms of individual players, but also are the steadiest in their recipe. What I mean by that is Arizona excels in their same stuff all the time. They are able to grow their leads by doing something repeatably very well. They score among the best in the country. They rebound among the best in the country. They shoot a boatload of easy shots. They defend the rim and are 9th on offense, 11th on defense, and have tons of strides that have already started to improve, but certainly will continue to improve on offense, such as knock down some open threes, play a little faster than 45th in the country, which is Tommy Lloyd's slowest that he's had, or just about the slowest. It's on pace with the slowest. And then they seem more and more capable of further dominating teams on the glass. And that furthers their offensive efficiency. They're shooting poorly and infrequently. And they've shown resolve that brings me to the sure thing. That is their role allocation and ability for multiple players to step up at different times when different numbers and names are asked. They've been called upon, and those calls have been answered. Arizona has an All-American, a lottery pick in Koa Pete. They have a senior point guard who's all-conference, potential NBA guard, potential All-American, a potential NBA center, a potential NBA wing in Braden Burris, maybe multiple in Karchenkov and Aristote that are growing into themselves, and very mature veterans like Del Orso and Awaka. They also are led by a tactical genius in Tommy Lloyd, and one whose only fault you can point to in winning 78% of his games entering this season have been games played slowly. And this year, they're 3-0 in big games, and 2 of those games, in which they're underdogs in all of them, they are played super slowly, into the hands, in hostile environments, and 1 playing slowly and not shooting well at all. They combine for 3.3 threes per game in 3 big matchups. Arizona meets the eye test metrics, and they also meet the advanced analytic metrics. And what impresses me most is the reproducibility. And on the reproducibility scale of their performances, they are number 1 in the country right now, which is not something that fits for all these teams that have more variance from the mean and the median level of play. Arizona can teeter one way or another. I don't even think they're at their A game yet, but they've been able to win in a numerous different fashions, and they've done so convincingly and being the better team by a lot in games where they're still figuring it out. Coming up next, I'll discuss the Tier 1B contenders to cut down the nets and why Arizona should be favored against them if on a neutral court, at least at this point. The holidays always feel a little easier when you already know the perfect gift, and Omaha Steaks makes it almost too simple. Whether you're treating yourself this season or sending something memorable to family and friends, Omaha Steaks delivers handcrafted perfection right to their door. And this week is the best time to jump in because their cyber sale is here, and the deals are huge. The quality is exactly what you hope for. Incredibly tender steaks, rich flavor, and meals that make hosting or just weeknight cooking easier and still delicious. The variety is underrated as well. The steaks are what you're known for, Omaha Steaks. But the burgers, comfort meals, sides, desserts, it's one of those gifts that truly fits anyone, and everyone loves it. Save big on unforgettable gifts with Omaha Steaks. Visit omahasteaks.com for 50% off site-wide and an extra 20% off select favorites during their cyber sale. And an additional $35 off. Use promo code COLLEGE at checkout. That's omahasteaks.com, promo code COLLEGE. Terms apply. See site for details. Thank you guys for making Locked On Wildcats your first listen of the day, and thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network around. Leif Thulin with you here on Locked On Wildcats. And the A-tier teams are undefeated and passing the eye test. That is the reason they are the top tier, Tier 1A versus Tier 1B. Arizona has the best resume. Purdue and Michigan, I think, at their best, look the best, but they have had unconvincing performances against inferior teams. I mentioned Michigan almost lost to Wake Forest. Michigan also almost lost to TCU, and TCU lost to New Orleans earlier in this year. Arizona has had near losses against the defending champion, Florida Gators, who also is top 10 in KenPom. They've had a near loss in Inglewood against UCLA, against a rival, and then against UConn at UConn. But oh, wait, they won. So the next 2 are right there. And I say right there at the top 3. The next 2 are the 4th and 5th best teams in the country. To my eye, that's the Duke Blue Devils and the UConn Huskies. Duke's undefeated. The metrics smile upon them, saying they're 5th on offense, 4th on defense, good for 3rd overall. Duke has an All-American, in my opinion, the best player in college basketball, among the best teams I speak of. I want to be clear here. For reference, and for future reference, if those of you who want to take receipts, I think Darren Peterson is the best player in the country. I think Darren Peterson should be the #1 pick. But Cam Boozer is most likely to win National Player of the Year due to consistency and team success, which is why I've been saying Cam Boozer should be the #1 pick in a fantasy draft. Cam Boozer should be the #1 most selected player to win National Player of the Year. Well ahead of anyone else. Duke has a National Player of the Year candidate at the very least, and has young guys that continue that continue to grow, much like what Arizona has. Their recipes are not dissimilar whatsoever. And much like Duke of last year with Cooper Flagg and a bunch of young guys, this team's going to get better as the season goes along because they are reliant on young guys, and young guys grow the most within the season. Not season 2 but within the season, especially when you have NBA talent. Duke already has the defensive chops. They are huge, much like Arizona. They're positionally huge at every single spot. They defend very well. They stifle teams and also can disrupt, make you play faster than you'd like, and take you out of things you like to do offensively. So far, when Duke plays, bet the under, and that has been extremely successful as they hold teams to the fewest points in the country. And Duke's played good programs. They've played Kansas, but lacking Darren Peterson. They've played Texas and Arkansas. Neither team has been all that good so far. And those teams haven't been as good as Duke has thought. So it's hard to give them the same eye test of, oh, they beat really good teams, because those teams didn't look good in those games. And Duke didn't necessarily inspire that much faith because they weren't fantastic. That may inspire hope that they'll get better, but the eye test doesn't support what I've seen to the same degree as Michigan, Purdue at their very best, blasting good teams, and Arizona finding a way to beat 3 good teams. So let's compare Duke to Arizona. They each have an All-American, and I'd actually take Boozer. I'm sorry, I love Koa Pete. I think Koa Pete's fantastic. I think Cam Boozer's the better player right now. They have a top 10 defense, much like Arizona, and so they can stay in every game even if they're not shooting well. They have an NBA talent elsewhere, aside from the All-American. They have a wing who can really shoot the ball in Isaiah Evans, but their issue when compared to Arizona, why Arizona is better right now, and I think will be better down the road, is point guard play. Caleb Foster has started 3 years in a row, and in the two prior seasons has been benched for relative ineptitude against the highest level. Not scoring enough, not facilitating enough, and also they've had a depth of talent that very few teams can repeat. Caden Boozer, twin of Cam Boozer, has to improve greatly to be the guy at point guard position that inspires enough faith to lift a national championship trophy. But all teams that win it all have excellent lead guards. And while Evans is really good and he's a great shooter, he's supremely sneaky and he's an off-ball guard. And he leads to a level of live and die by the 3 just by the token of he's going to shoot a lot of them. That's what his greatest weapon is. So if he's not shooting particularly well, it's got to be a Cam Boozer night. And I think that makes it a little more dangerous and precarious to win that way. Duke has had games so far this season already where Boozer is doubled and he swings the ball and he accumulates assists. And their offense sputters at times because the offense is not super dynamic. They run really good stuff. And then he's had triple doubles in those games. And then he's had other games where teams leave him solo and it's ISO ball and he scores 35. He's really good. And that's super similar to Koa Pete in Arizona. Except Arizona's got other guys who can step up and score, especially Jaden Bradley, because at the end of the game, Arizona knows, give the ball to Jaden Bradley. The senior's going to get to his spots, and he's going to be the closer, and he's going to be great. The other difference is Arizona does not rely on threes the way that Duke does to set up their – and not only in terms of scoring points, like they're relying on it is not something Arizona does, but also Duke relies on the threat of the 3 to set up all their actions. Their best action is what I call a split action, where Isaiah Evans uses gravity as a shooter coming off a floppy ball screen or a pin down, and he comes up away from the ball, and it sets up split cut opportunities for a guy like Malik Brown or Dame Sarr, who are slashers, to go to the basket using the threat of Evans and Boozer and their space as a shooter in Evans and the ball handler in Boozer, both in the low post or at the top of the key. They open up more space. You got to shoot well to have that respected. And shooting has more of variability than scoring from 3 feet. You can be shooting badly from 3 feet and you're going to shoot a higher percentage than just about anyone shooting well from 25. Arizona scores more reproducibly than Duke. And Duke needs all things clicking from deep to win at the highest level, as opposed to it just being helpful like Arizona. It helps to shoot well. But Duke shoots 28 threes per game as compared to 32 twos per game. Duke has the depth and the room to grow with a bunch of freshmen and the maturation that'll happen there. They're definitely a title contender, but my concerns are their shooting, and is it more detrimental to their chances to shoot that much, but also have a point guard who's not as good as Arizona's? I think Arizona right now is the better team than Duke, and I also like their chance to maintain being better than Duke. The only thing that gives me pause is if they start to shoot well and have a few other players that haven't been good so far step up, I think they have more room for role change. And if someone steps up and stars in another role, then they have a chance to enter Tier A. In sum, I see Duke as a pretty similar pair on par to Arizona. I do think the edge at this point is Arizona's because of point guard play. You're not going to see a team win without a great point guard, but shutdown defense, ability to shoot, and they may have more spurt ability, but I don't think they're quite as consistent. And then there's UConn. So those are the 4 best teams, and I think UConn's right there as well. UConn, whom Arizona beat in Connecticut at Storrs in Gamble Pavilion in a true road game and led throughout, even leading by 13 at one point. UConn's still a top 5 team in my opinion. That only strengthens how good Arizona is. Arizona won on the glass by 20 against them. UConn was missing their center, and I'm not privy to that point. They also are missing a sharpshooter by the name of Mullins. UConn has 1 loss, and that was against Arizona, and there's no shame in that. I think they're going to cruise through the Big East and have very few tests. So they need to win their big test now to strengthen their resume. UConn has one of the best starting fives, and by virtue of that, one of the best 8-man rotations in college hoops when fully healthy. As we saw them not fully healthy, and they gave Arizona all they could handle. If Reed can continue to be as good as he has been and as good on the glass as he's been, that makes UConn really tough because they run beautiful, meticulous actions on offense that lead to a lot of wide open threes, which of course has decent variance, but they beat a good team like Illinois in Madison Square Garden fairly easily without shooting well at all. In fact, shooting very poorly. UConn does that because they play their own pace. You're not going to speed UConn up. They control pace, and that allows teams to have trouble. But the way to beat them is if you can out-rebound UConn, like Arizona did by 20. That makes UConn vulnerable. That's why if Terrace Reed and Eric Riba are rebounding, they become very difficult to beat. Also, UConn has some tinkering to figure out. Is Silas Demery and Solo Ball? That's a really good backcourt, but have they worked together well? Neither has quite figured it out the same day. And who's the best three to play? Is it Ross? Is it Stewart? Is it Mullins? There's some tinkering to happen. There's going to be growth. They should cruise through the Big East, though. These are all good problems to have in theory, but if the problem lasts too long, if it persists a little too long, then there's a lack of identity at times. I think Arizona and UConn are similar overall. UConn controls pace better than Arizona, but Arizona is more physically imposing than Connecticut, and that in and of itself creates problems, much like Connecticut did for other teams during their two-peat, where they were able to win with Donovan Clingan blocking everything on the interior. The size of Arizona creates problems and allows a side of the ball defensively to loom large, and even on bad days, Arizona is able to score a lot and efficiently due to how close they shoot from. Their proximity of their many chances is created by a massive front line, and Arizona is going to have that advantage against just about anyone. So to totally sum up the top 5 teams in college basketball, they're the best 5 in my opinion right now. And if I try to parse through Arizona versus the others of these elite teams, I can find reasons to say Arizona is better than the rest of them. I can find reasons I don't think are crazy that bode extremely well for Arizona. And at this time last year, this may make you guys feel good. I had circled the 6 best teams in college basketball. The 4 number 1 seeds were among those 6 and 2 number 2 seeds. Those 2 seeds were Tennessee and Alabama. So every team I mentioned in my top 6 last year at this point made the Elite 8 or better, and one of them won the championship. I don't know if I can repeat that, but it does bode well to have your team listed in this list. Right now, these teams are the 5 best, and I virtually guarantee they're going to be top 3 seeds at the lowest, and I almost guarantee top 2 seeds. But from these 5, I think you're going to see your national champion. Coming up next, we're going to investigate the next 3 teams that I think are the only ones who have a chance to win it all outside of the top 5 I just listed, and explain why Arizona is better than them now and down the road. College football's back, and I couldn't be more excited. The tailgates, the rivalries, and the energy in the stands, there's nothing like it. But let's be real. Actually getting tickets can feel like more of a battle than the game itself. Endless queues, hidden fees, prices jumping at checkout. That's why I use Game Time, the app that gives the advantage back to the fans. It's the easiest way to score last-minute tickets at the best prices with no surprise fees. What you see is what you pay. I pulled up Game Time in just a couple taps. I saw amazing deals. I'm talking about your favorite college football games as low as $25. It's faster, cheaper, and less stressful than any other way I've bought tickets. So take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app and create an account. Use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go download Game Time today. Welcome back to Locked On Wildcats, and thank you for making Locked On Wildcats your first listen of the day, and thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network around. I'm your host, Leif Thulin. The last 3 teams, I believe, are contenders as the top-tier teams that can cut down the nets, but I have less faith in than the other 5 are Gonzaga, Houston, and Louisville. As for Houston, I'll start there because they're a familiar Big 12 opponent. I want to spend the most time on them. They have a super, super clear recipe as to what they do well and what they will do. That gives them a very, very high floor. And they have as high a floor as anyone in the country. But I want to be clear. I would be shocked if this team wins it, even though everyone in the prognostications before the year said this is the team to win it for Houston because Houston's dominated the Big 12 in their 2 years there. They made the championship game, should have won that game, and they returned 3 starters. Houston has a clear recipe. They will grow because they're young, and Kelvin is great. And I mean great. I want to emphasize that. They have 3 starters back, but they lost their identity. And that was Juwan Roberts, a 6th-year bruiser who is a late clock scorer, a defensive stalwart, a communicator, and a leader, a guy who could rebound the ball and make something happen offensively, a guy defensively you would not want to mess with, could switch 1 through 5. And then there's the second loss who happened to be an All-American, and it's in that order. I'm being very particular about what order I win in. It is Juwan Roberts and then L.J. Cryer. L.J. Cryer was an All-American, and that's more replaceable than what Juwan Roberts brought. And I wanted to be clear about that before the season. I said that to Parker Ainsworth, the great host of Locked On Cougs. I respect Parker immensely. I love what he said about them, but I'm pretty confident that this Houston team is going to have a hard time being as good as they have been the last couple of years. I think they're growing pains. Last year they started 4-3, which is everyone's point. Oh, Houston's 4-3. Yeah, but they're really good. They've played some good teams. Right now, they've won some games so unconvincingly that is unlike Houston. So I think they lost a guy in L.J. Cryer that can shoot the lights out, can make late clock shots. They have some of that. They also have a guard in Kingston Flemings who's played his way into lottery conversations as a freshman. And I've gotten pushback about saying Houston lost a lot and lost more than they got brought back. And they've always had guard step up. Jamal Shed followed Marcus Sasser. After Marcus Sasser, after Jamal Shed, you had this team led by Uzan and by Sharp. But losing a guy like Juwan Roberts simultaneously with an All-American guard, they have not had to do. I've had doubts about their scoring ability this season and what will be many close games due to their slow pace and non-explosive offense, meaning that there's going to be games that get tight, and they tend to do great in those games, but you can't win that many games that are that tight. And if they're not blowing teams out with their defense, their offense is going to hold them back a little bit. And last year, I was higher on Houston than I ever had been. This year, I'm lower on Houston than I have been. We'll see. Houston proved me right last year. We'll see what they do this year. They have a floor that is so high that they deserve a chance to be in this conversation, because when I say I'm low on Houston, it's not like saying I'm low on another team where they plummet to the top, just the top 20, as opposed to being top 4 like they were by every poll in America before the season. To me, this pushes them down towards 10. But they have a chance to win it because their defense is so good. And if they get hot offensively, they figure it out. Kelvin Sampson is one of the best coaches in the country. There is a chance. Houston is so hard to beat. They'll play many close games. They're far more fallible than years past to me, but they deserve a shout here. The next team is Gonzaga, who got smoked by Michigan, but previously was the Ken Pom number 1. And the narrative around Gonzaga was, this is not the same team that Mark Few had when Tommy Lloyd was at Gonzaga. It's a team that is old and defensively oriented. They have 2 bigs on the inside, Graham Ike and Braden Huff. They feast on the interior, rebound well, don't have the best shooting. The defense is very good, and they play in a nearly identical tempo to Arizona, strangely enough. They're both 44th and 45th, separated by fractions. The thing about this team, though, is who steps up and shoots it well from teams that have enough size to make it hard to score? Who can score as a wing when they don't have the advantage created by doubling Graham Ike? Michigan did not need to double and thwarted everything. So Gonzaga, I hesitated to put on here, but out of respect for Mark Few and the recipe of being very good on offense and defense and being very stout defensively, that's not reliant on crazy amount of threes, then I think you got a chance. And similarly to Arizona, they're not reliant on three-point shooting, not at all. And upon further, that was an eye test assumption, I just looked it up, and upon further investigation, they're 309th in three-pointers attempted per field goal attempt, meaning they do not rely heavily on the three at all. Furthermore, Gonzaga only scores 24% of their total points from three, which is 315th. Arizona is at 358th in attempts per field goal attempt and 353rd in points accumulated from three at 20.6%. So Arizona is less reliant but shoots it better than Gonzaga, meaning Arizona is the better offense with less reliance on three. And to me, far, far more area for growth as a far younger team than the lineup of Gonzaga that features multiple 23-year-olds on a team playing college basketball. Arizona's got similar metrics, better on the interior, in my opinion, a guy with more potential to be an All-American and take a team further and co-compete than Graham Ike. And while Gonzaga has an All-American in Ike and solid slashing wing in Tyron Grant Foster and a young point guard in Spain that I think is impressive, I would say he's not an upper echelon point guard in college basketball yet. And therefore, I'm a little lower on Gonzaga as compared to Arizona, as compared to the prior 5 teams I've listed. I would say I'd be a little shocked if Gonzaga wins it, but they deserve to be in this both statistically and from the early eye test, what it yields. Lastly, Louisville. This is the 8th team I can see win a title, but usually this recipe scares me because bad shooting nights do occur. Louisville is a high-powered, lightning-fast tempo team that plays solid defense when their best big is in. His name is Sananda Fru from Germany, but when he's out, they're a little iffy. They're second on offense, 30th on defense, and that's typically you want to be top 20 in both. That's close enough where I'm willing to include them. They shoot the heck out of the ball. They have a mold of a team that is more upsettable because they have more deviance from what is their norm. When they shoot great, they'll run you out of a gym. When they shoot poorly, you got a solid chance. Bad games do happen, though, when you shoot from 23 feet 40 times versus what Arizona does, shooting 45 times from 5 feet and in. That's the recipe employed by Arizona. It's the recipe employed by Gonzaga. It's safer. There's less variation than what Louisville does. Louisville has multiple elite guards, which is why I keep them in this list. Even though my initial premise when I started this was to say only 7 teams can win it, I thought maybe I'll put an 8th just in case because Louisville plays fast. I would be surprised if Louisville wins it, but they deserve to be in this top 8. Their defense, that is iffy, and their dependency on a high dosage of threes is why they're the lowest on here. But it's a pretty good list to be on. I'll be curious to see if teams can slow them down and make them play in the half court, much like Arizona's early teams with Tommy Lloyd did. This team's more three-point dependent than any team Tommy Lloyd's coached, but pace, if you can slow them down, I think Louisville becomes vulnerable. Louisville has the best chance when Sananda Fru is in, the big guy from Germany, but when he's out, their defense is poor. That said, they have Michael Brown, Ryan Conwell, Isaac McNeely, and multiple others who can really light it up from the perimeter, and they have size and depth to play at the pace that Pat Kelsey wants them to play. To me, the difference between Arizona and Louisville is obvious. Arizona's A game will not be as explosive as Louisville's A game on their best nights, but they have far more ways to win. Arizona's already shown they can win a fast-paced game where they battle on the glass against big teams like Florida. They can win a slow-paced game like UCLA, and they have a true closer with experience. And I'll take Jaden Bradley over Michael Brown, even though Michael Brown might be the 6th pick of the draft. The best teams in the country can win fast. They can win slow. They can win a barn burner. They can win a rock fight. They can win one of those hot shooting nights, and they can win on a day when the game is played at a snail's pace. You can win with threes or a heavy dosage of twos, and Arizona has more ways to win than just about any team in the country. And they've shown it already, and will get more and more chances to show it in Big 12 play. I think Arizona also can score off penetration or off set plays that are scripted, and they can also score just by individually overwhelming teams with size and athleticism, whether that's scoring off mismatches or forcing turnovers. I like Arizona's problem solvability, and they have a lot of answers to the questions that have been asked of them already. And to me, they're squarely among the title favorites. And to me, easily the favorite in the Big 12, even though the odds makers won't tell you that, but I will. Thank you guys for making Locked On Wildcats your first listen today. For your second listen, check out Locked On Big 12. Drake Toll breaks down the most exciting conference in college sports, from the rivalries to the championships and every game in between. Find Locked On Big 12 on YouTube, wherever you listen to your podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.